Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 37th session of the AIM Prime program. Today's session is on Networking 101, the importance of social capital. And our speaker for today is Dr. Shailendra Vyakarnam. Dr. Vyakarnam is presently visiting professor at Cranfield University and also associate of the senior combination room of King's College, Cambridge. He has had a career as educator when he pioneered education for entrepreneurship as founding director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Learning at Cambridge. He has published a dozen books, supervised doctoral students, published in academic journals, advised policymakers, and held various board positions. Dr. Vyakarnam has mentored hundreds of deep tech entrepreneurs and co-founded several businesses over his career. More recently, he has invested as business angel in 7 firms, 3 of which are led by female entrepreneurs. So with this brief introduction, welcoming Dr. Vyakarnam, and over to you.
Thank you very much. The recording bar and the YouTube thing is running right across my screen. Here we are, okay. Good evening, everyone. Let's see if I can successfully get this started. And hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see a screen now.
Okay.
You can go full
Is it
screen.
in full view?
Yeah, now it's full screen. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Premnath and Mugdha, for inviting me to do this session. It gives me a chance to do 2 things, I suppose. One is once again reinforce the importance of building up networks and social capital, and maybe in our discussions we can see also how long it takes and how much effort it does require as a trickling along function throughout. But also it gives me a chance to dust out some of my old research on the social capital of Cambridge, the city that was a small, quiet, rural village thing that then had an 800-year-old university, which suddenly seems to be at the center of a lot of deep tech, high-tech stuff, not least in life sciences. So let's just press on a little bit. So I want to just cover why we need to do, why social networking is important. Networking 101 is important. Sometimes those of us that are in the professional environment think of it as somewhat, how should I put it, infra-dig and not something we should engage in it somehow, unsavory, whatever. And then, of course, when we get past that blockage that we might have, and some of you may have it, some of you may not have it, the next question is a little bit of the how do we, where do we make a start? How do we make a start? I've suggested a breakout session. If that's going to work, we're happy to do that. If not, we can just carry on through a short discussion. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the whole business of the impact that a good, strong network of the kind that you're creating on AIM and Prime, it's a venture center, how that can really turbocharge. And I think I have to say that since BIRAC and Venture Center, CCamp in Bangalore, et cetera, that the whole kind of bioeconomy in Cambridge is in India, is accelerating further forward because of the networks that have been created and the links and the spirit in which these things are happening. So, who am I? Mugdha's given you a quick intro, but my own intro is also that I'm passionate about science and tech entrepreneurship. I've been at it for about 20 years now in terms of being a mentor, an educator, and an entrepreneur. I guess my start point is always with unlocking the inner entrepreneur, because scientists, I think, and technologists generally are kind of the best sources of the big ideas that we need in the world to change the world to a better place. They could also be guilty of having given us things that we're now having to contend with, frankly speaking. Back there's the Industrial Revolution and coal mining and all the rest of it, but I think there are also the groups of people who can now fix things that are happening in the world. So that's the human level. Then on the business side of things, I guess there are 2 things, maybe 3 things that I particularly focus on, is the viability of the market of the project idea that's coming through, and then also does it all make sense financially? Should the scientist, the entrepreneur, be actually doing this, or just get a job somewhere else? How big, how capable is this? Will it put bread on the table, and so on? The thing that I spend a lot of my time with early stage companies, especially, is helping them to build teams, especially senior teams. It seems to me step one of that is persuading the lone scientist or entrepreneur or group or pair that they actually need a senior team of people around them. And entrepreneurship is a plural activity, not a singular activity. I'm very keen on governance because I've seen when startups and early stage companies are a little bit, how should I put it, jugaad about their startup and don't keep the trace of paperwork, at the time they come to raise money or pay their taxes, they get into severe difficulty. And without the governance in place and all the necessary paperwork in place, this goes well beyond the FDA regulations, it goes into all sorts of other areas, then the company never really forms into a real pakka business. It always ever remains a project. And so it's actually quite important to get there. We might have a discussion about that at some stage. So those are kind of my interests for those of you that might want to get back in touch with me. And also I have quite an extensive network across the world, but I have to say, having seen the speaker lineup from NCL Venture Center, and absolutely mind-blowing high quality stuff. So that's not where you need my strength. So I sent this note through about what we'll try and cover, that, you know, networking is an essential skill for entrepreneurs and so forth, because there's so much hidden data and information and insights in there. Let me just talk this through in a different way. So I've been the head of entrepreneurial learning at Cambridge for 14 years, and before that at Nottingham and Cranfield, and then back to Cranfield again. And if I was to summarize 3 headline terminologies, I would say, of what is entrepreneurial learning. The question arises from the fact whether or not you can teach it. I would say that the 3 components of it are, first of all, what is your personal motivation? What are your personal circumstances? If you have a good self-awareness of who you are, what you're trying to do, your strengths and your weaknesses, if you like, your so-called superpowers, as some academics are putting it now. What can you do? What might be the gaps where you need to bring some people in to help you with stuff? The second thing, which is not often taught in the university world, is social skills. How to bring people on side, how to keep time, how to present yourself, how to do sales pitching, team building, all of those sort of basic things that you think are intuitively there, but we're not taught. Just like we're not taught how to become sons-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, you know, we're not taught how to become parents. We learn them by making mistakes and by seeing other people. And it's kind of a little bit like that with social skills. Right? And that is such a big component. It's seen as somewhat fluffy. It is seen as a bit wishy-washy. You know, what is this? We know this stuff kind of thing. You know, it's written off. But actually, the make or break of so many business relationships come from making mistakes in the social skills that we might or might not possess. The third, of course, is if you're going into business, you know a little bit about how to do business. It's obvious, right? So all your financial marketing strategy, all those things come into there. And often within the world of entrepreneurship, we focus huge amount of time and energy on understanding business and business vocabulary. I'm not sure we spend enough time thinking about why we're doing this. What's our motivation for this? What are our circumstances? You know, maybe we think more in the last 2 years about that, but not, you know, often I don't see that happening. And I also don't understand and see people actually sharpening their social skills, right? There's no magic to it. It just needs to be there. And some of you have demonstrated amazing social skills, and they're good role models for us. So that, I would say, broadly speaking, and today, of course, it's the yellow circle, the social skills bit, that I want to try and focus on in different ways. So what is this networking thing? Why are we interested in that? Why do we need networks? We need networks for a number of different reasons, right? Helping to validate your ideas. You know, is your idea even a good one? Where do you go to figure this out? Who do you talk to? Who do you ask? Who do you know that you trust that you can ask? If you're trying to build a team, where do you start? Do you start by advertising on Naukri.com, or do you go out on LinkedIn.com, or do you go on some other .com, or do you talk to somebody you trust and say, hey, look, I'm looking for so-and-so. Who do you know that I could ask, right? So your first step might simply be linked to a mentor or a coach who says, yep, actually, there is somebody I know. That was my role more recently in a company called Corrosion Radar, helped to form the team and brought the advisory and the CEO on board, the chairman on board. And then also, which lawyer do you trust? Which accountant do you trust? Who gives you the right tax advice to make sure? Are they affordable? Where do they hang out? Can I get airtime with them? Where do you find all this information? Yes, it might be on databases and all the rest of it on websites and so forth. And Professor Google, of course, knows everything. But at the end of the day, you want a little bit of an introduction to make sure you're talking to the right person, right? At the right level. So in the UK, for example, some companies are using this online thing called Seed Legal. But then there's all guys like me that think, who's actually doing the work? I can't pick up the phone to somebody and say, can I ask you a question? Because there is no relationship. It's just a transaction. It's an online transaction. I can't see how that becomes part of a network. You can't network with a website, right? So what do? Where do you find your advisory board, your main board, your scientific advisory board? How do you form those? Where are they going to come from? Why will they help you and sort you out? Why will they give you their credibility so you can use that in your marketing? So there's a lot of reasons. And also, of course, the investors prefer warm intros. So I was talking to one yesterday evening. He was doing his due diligence on a potential investee. He was asking me about the team. At the end of the conversation, his question was, well, if there are people who need the type of investment that we would make, here's a pathway to that. So the pathway to that seems to be that I'm willing to do some mentoring for their startups. And if I do that, then I can also end up in making introductions. So very cautious, very careful approaches are there. And then, of course, customers, that all precious resource that we need. Who's going to open the doors to you? I had very good news today that a big hitter name from Mumbai has introduced the startups that I've been working with who are in Madhya Pradesh to the world's biggest, one of the world's biggest communication companies, Saatchi and Saatchi. That's come through after nearly 6 months. The gentleman has taken his time to understand the two guys in the startup, believe in their product, seen their demos, and then has written an extremely warm introduction to Saatchi and Saatchi. Those of you that don't know that company is like one of the biggest marketing communication businesses around, huge reputation. And I saw a very warm email going back to the two young entrepreneurs saying, yeah, get back in touch. Right? So that was a massive door opening event that took place. Took 6 months because of the trust building that was required in between. Then you need people who will talk about you to others, right, to give you credibility. So you need somebody who is trusted, reliable, respected in industry. Said, hey, you know what? I met such and such an entrepreneur on this AIM program. Excellent business. Could you give them 15 minutes of your time, talk about it, and so on? And maybe persuade them to come on your advisory board if it's appropriate. And those are the kind of things that happen. And then, of course, the value of being inside a network is you learn stuff that isn't in textbooks. Thereby, you manage to avoid mistakes, costly mistakes that can be made, just because you have some peer-to-peer or senior people to yourself having that discussion. And also accessing domain experts, which is one of the hardest things I've found, actually, finding the right domain expert for entrepreneurs. And the final point I'd like to make on this, why do we need to have networks and why do we need to access these networks, is because sometimes it's just exhausting to do this thing on your own. And you need to be part of an ecosystem from which you can draw energy and accelerate your business ideas. So those are my thoughts on why you need networks. Maybe you're scribbling your own reasons for why you need to be part of a network, why, who you need to get to know. And maybe we can pick that up in the discussions. So networking, I think, is an exchange. Okay, network is not just about the one-way street. And I'll give you my thoughts on that with people who are good at networking and people who are not so good at networking. So in this relationship, in this illustration I could find, there's this little child presumably wanting something from the monastic, the monk there, and he is giving something, but you have to ask yourself, what is he getting back from it? Maybe he's getting some satisfaction from having helped a child to unlock something in them, right? That's an exchange. A lot of mentors who give their time free want something back. And for each one, it's something slightly different. In this picture, it might be just the satisfaction that this child has moved on in her thinking, the way she's articulating something. So there is some kind of exchange going on. It's definitely an exchange. So the mentees that I have had the pleasure of dealing with over the years, I was kind of thinking, who are the ones that I remember and why do I remember them? And because I suppose over the 30 years, I've probably had conversations with literally a few thousand young potential entrepreneurs, of whom a few hundred people have spent more time with me, and I remember maybe a few dozen of them. And I was thinking back to those dozen and thinking, what is it I remember of those people? Well, the first one is a little bit obvious. They were asking me questions. They had a very clear set of questions for me, right? And they came to me for my knowledge, if you like, or thought that I had a particular knowledge. They were listening very carefully. And then beauty of it was a bit like the previous picture. They were thinking about what I had said. They processed it with other people they had talked to, and then they acted independently. And the beauty of it at the end of it was that they let me know what they did, right? So it's not that they did what I told them to do, but they came, they absorbed, and they thought about it, and then they acted, and they kept me in the loop. Not some long, turgid emails, but just even short snippets, little update, or having me on their groups on LinkedIn or something so I can keep up to them. And that is very important. So if the mentor doesn't know what happened, you obviously forget them, right? Or you forget the mentees, and you can't go back. And I know some students of mine in the past who've been on my course suddenly pop up out of the blue 4 or 5 years later and say, I was on your course in, I don't know, 2013 or 15 or something. Can you help me raise money? Right? I have no idea what they've been doing in between because they've not kept me up to date. I don't know if they've been to jail and back out again by this point. How do I know? What progress have they made? Why should I just suddenly open up my card index box with phone numbers in them and hand it to them just because they've got in touch again after 4 or 5 years, right? So keeping people up to date, keeping the momentum running, really important. The other beautiful thing about these mentees has been that they've introduced me to other people. I don't mean more mentees where I have to give yet more of my time, but maybe to other senior people who they might think has a shared interest. Right? Give and take. So they're giving me something back. And they've also brought energy into a conversation. There's a particular feel of that entrepreneurial energy that comes back into a conversation. They're willing to challenge you, ask you questions, and then they're processing and thinking. It's very satisfying a mentor to see that there's something going on. And the updating and so on, as I say, keeping in touch. Light touch, keeping in touch. And as a result of all that activity, it doesn't feel like a one-way street. So they're reciprocating the generosity that the mentor has given by giving something back. Right? It doesn't have to be laddus once a year at Diwali, right? It could be something else. Somehow something is coming back. And they keep the communication flowing. They build relationships, and networking is not a transaction for them. It is definitely something where you think, I remember this person, I'm going to help them out. Or they come back and say, how can I help you? And I have a very good example of that more recently.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a sound. Prerna, do you want to interject at that point? More than happy.
No, I think it's. Did you complete all the points in the last slide?
No, more than happy for you to add to that.
No, I just thought perhaps you missed something there. Please continue.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say the headline says people acting on the information and keeping me, and this is a very personal story about the best mentee so far, keeping me up to date. They bring energy, they reciprocate with introductions and so forth, right? And they see networking as something about building relationships and not about transactions. That's
Yes,
probably the key point on that.
Yeah, I agree entirely. In fact, this last sentence is very, very important because even when some of our startups are getting started, they assume that mentoring relationships are transactional, and that is a wrong starting point entirely. Very often they are not, and you need to explore. You need to show some sincerity in building relationships, and that can easily come out by from the willingness to contribute to that relationship building over a period of time in many different ways. So I agree entirely with this. Yeah.
Excellent. So the ones that I've forgotten, the forgettable mentees, they only come when they need something, right? So it's exactly the point you were making, Premna, a moment ago. And they're also not clear what they're doing. They only ask for introductions to investors. We need money, blah, blah, blah. And they don't necessarily follow up in a professional way when the introduction is made. So the trail goes cold. That has happened so many times to me. I'm absolutely fed up of that. Somebody says something, have a 20, 30-minute conversation, and you think, okay, let me see how I can help. And you have a second meeting, maybe that's an hour's worth of meeting. Then you have some email traffic in between. There's nearly 3 or 4 hours is taken up, and you make an introduction, and they don't follow up, right? And you've pre-warned the introduction, saying, I'm going to introduce XYZ to you, and they're waiting, and they hear nothing. And then that then damages the reputation, personal reputation. So if networking is treated as a transaction, not as a relationship and trust building, then the whole thing just absolutely falls apart. So these are sort of the good lessons that I've learned. People are keeping you in touch, keeping you informed. And I know that in a WhatsApp group, I can't remember the young man's name at the moment, but I know he raised a lot of money recently. News was being spread. I think Premnath, you were on the traffic. I saw Taslim on the traffic. I saw Satya on the traffic. And we were all celebratory about that because he's had the wisdom and the smarts to keep all of us informed. So when he does get in touch with us at some point, we'll all remember him. You know, he's one of maybe 60 or 70 people that has had the smarts to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you start if you're going to try and do networking? What are the tips? Okay. First and foremost, I would say you need to have a compelling so-called elevator pitch. I haven't given you a time, whether it should be 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute. You just need to have a compelling elevator pitch, short and succinct, which you can put across in a call. Nowadays, increasingly, in the old days, used to go to events to meet people. Those are lovely. And in those old days, there was a set of tips around how you managed it. May become relevant again. A fellow called Ken Morse at MIT used to give talks on that. And he would say, go and stand near the food table because everybody comes near the food table. And then make sure you know who the guest list is going to be and target the guest that you want to network with. It's obviously about clarity. And then make sure you have a pitch to that particular person to whom you want to introduce yourself to, and then go and do it. And that's kind of a very US-centric, very focused, very transactional way of getting things done. And I think that's fine to get things done. In the old days, maybe it's again, things like the Indus Entrepreneur events, maybe other open mic type events that are running around in cities is how you would go and at least get an introduction. My view, where to start is, especially as we're now moving into a different world, is to have somebody to introduce you to somebody. It's a softer, more polite, and more credible way, I think, rather than stalking somebody and hassling them. If you're going to do that, then your introducer needs to have all the right information. And to make it as simple for them to make the introduction, don't make them do the work. You do the work and give them the text for an email or phone call or something that they might say that's memorable, that they can say, okay, I know XYZ, I think you should meet them. Right? So just a recent example of exactly that was a British startup coming out of Bristol using quantum technology and a photonics chip to provide an OCT for what's called aging macular disease, right? Disorders. So basically, the OCTs scanners for eyes are huge, bulky, and the size of a room. And these guys have found a chip or created a chip which would reduce that. So they were talking in very scientific and engineering terms, and their pitch was not compelling. We managed to get in front of the head of ophthalmology for the US military in a conversation just a few days ago through one of my networks. And he said, yeah, if you've got a field deployable OCT machine, we'll be all over it. Right? That was his remark. That meant that we had a succinct single sentence with which to talk to people in future. A field deployable OCT. How easy is that? Because it doesn't even need a whole sentence, right? Had they opened with that, it would be so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And they did get introduced, and the introducer had all the right information. The problem now is, and I'm going to come to this, if you approach people of that caliber too early, without the capacity to follow up, it means you were not really clear why you were going there, right? The pitch should include that these guys were very early stage, just coming out of the lab, and they just wanted to know typically what a user would want from such a system. And then we'll come back in about a year when we have the demonstrator ready, but would it be okay to keep in touch? Instead, they got the intro, they had a whole thing, they got invited to something in Bethesda, they got this, they got that, and then they sent an email saying, very sorry, we're just overloaded with our own activity in the UK, we'll come to the US in about a year from now. So I think they fired a twin barrel shotgun to each of their feet with that very high level introduction that might have unlocked a market of it because they did not follow through on the compelling pitch.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I have seen many, many examples where the pitch, the storyboard, the clarity, the whole thing is done nicely, and you can see a massive acceleration of the business opportunity. And if you like, if you don't have your own examples, I'm more than happy to share mine. Just a bit of a light-hearted look at the old days. And here, this is not exactly somebody pitching to somebody, but you can see that there's a height difference between the two, right? And often in networking events, the background noise level is quite loud, especially once you're over the age of 40, as I am. And what happens is that you can't actually hear what's going on. And the person is staring and is probably doing lip reading while you're trying to get something across. So these are little stupid little things that just get in the way of you being able to communicate with somebody. You lose eye contact because they're focusing on listening so intently at you. So if you are going to try and network or chat with somebody, just take that extra 10 seconds to see that you've actually got the right positioning in a way that you can get your point across. Maybe find 2 chairs nearby, sit the other person down with a glass of water or something, and then make your pitch. Right? And then make sure that they get interested in you. And how will you make a positive impact on that? And the other little stupid things that happen with networking events is some people are always looking for the next conversation, right? So while you are talking to them, they're looking over your shoulder to see who is more interesting to go talk to. That's what I mean by roving eye. I don't mean anything nasty by that. But they're looking for where's the next conversation happening. If you are guilty of that, watch out, because that means the person you are networking with knows you're not actually paying attention to the thing in front of you. You're actually just doing some kind of ritual, right? So these are just simple, stupid little things that get in the way. Prernath, you want to add anything to this? I know you have a lot of events around you. You must have learned a lot of lessons.
Oh yeah, I'm still learning a lot. Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely on this as well. The eye contact is one other thing which you often find is also sort of the sincerity in the conversation, right? In the sense, you just, sometimes you just want to tell people what you're doing just because you're excited about it. Or that you're interested enough about it, or you think that you want to have a lot more converts on your side, and you're rallying people to war cry kind of a thing.
Yeah,
It is not necessarily just to sort of parrot out a particular line and expect that somebody will. So people look in your eyes to see how passionate
exactly.
you are, whether something rings a bell. In some ways, they're also seeing whether you are going to draw interest from others as well, right? It gives them a
Exactly.
sense of how much they can bet on you and so on. So I think it's really important that what you do with a lot of sincerity, and not avoid the transactional approach in every conversation. I mean, try to
Yeah.
just keep it focused on just that moment and delivering that particular your message, without worrying too much about what will come out of it. So I think our Gita's message is probably very relevant there. Just
Yeah.
do it, don't worry about the results, right? And
Totally,
yeah, so
totally, totally. And in the early days when this was becoming all the fashion, the networking was becoming a massive fashion, and all sorts of events everywhere for networking. One of the trophies that you would have is you came out, the young entrepreneur would come out, is how many business cards you collected, right?
mhm.
And there was also a bit of a ritual of how many business cards you handed out. And it just became a scorekeeping thing. And nothing really seriously happened from that. It's just complete nonsense. And so, yes, the eye contact, the body language, the whole thing is such an important aspect. Now, challenge for us is, of course, all this is in the old days when we used to go to events. Now, increasingly, we're doing things online with the so-called new world of social media. I don't know the rules of the game anymore on this. I hear about Clubhouse, I hear about LinkedIn and Twitter, and I am on some of these platforms, WhatsApp and Telegram and so on. And I think the rules are emerging still. But I think the human aspect, because these are, if you like, I would say without soul, these are soulless channels, right? Um, as indeed is the risk of sort of generic networking events. So how do you put across your sincerity to people using these platforms? I don't know necessarily that these are mechanisms for networking. I think there are tools that could be used. I don't have a clear answer. Maybe somebody in today's cohort would have help me to learn about this, because it's happening so fast. The rules are changing so quickly, and we're moving into new ways of thinking, where the gig economy has taken off and nobody actually wants a relationship. They just want to put bread on the table. That's fair enough this day and age. So this is the set of questions that are coming to my mind. If you are involved in these so-called virtual meetings, going beyond Snapchat, Twitter, Indigo, not Indigo, whatever that, there we are, the photographic things and the tumblers and all that sort of noise which is taking place out there. It's a bit like the background noise at an event, right? It's just too much noise. How do you cut through it all? Anyway, if you are in a so-called Zoom situation and you are trying to have a meeting with somebody, how do you conduct yourself on that, right? What's the lighting and the audio quality, the camera angle, the background that you might have? Are there distractions available to you? So I don't know what you think of my background. It's, I think, semi-formal. I've tried to get enough light from the window, but it's nearly 30 centigrade outside, so I have to close the curtain a little bit. And I'm trying my level best to look at the camera, because I think making that eye contact as best we can is quite important. But it is a very, very, very difficult medium in which to engage. And I know in some cases, people don't take any interest in that, and they're looking at the big screen, and you're therefore looking at somebody's left ear or somebody's right ear or their bald patch or their double chin. And none of these make a professional impact on your audience. Second thing is, and this I am quite clear about, is if you are trying to get introduced or trying to open the door yourself to somebody you want to meet, you are inevitably going to be asked to send an email, right? And that email has to be really quite compelling. That's a whole new skill. And I have now kind of myself evolved into what I would describe as 7-word pitch. Can you say within 7 words what you would like to get out of that email, right? How do you get the engagement? What's going to create that rouse that interest? This is like a micro elevator pitch that you need to figure out. And I've translated that even if your vision statement for your company that you develop probably also should not exceed about 7 or 8 words, because you won't remember what it is. And if you have to look it up, believe me, it's not a vision, it's just a ritual, right? So what's the clear, simple, engaging mission that you can get into the subject header? Remember, I don't know what is the font, Premnath, on a typical phone? Do you happen to know? Is it 1 or 2 size font?
On a typical phone, you said?
Yeah, smartphone. When you get an email from somebody, does anybody know? Please interject if you happen to know.
Should be 12.
Yeah, that's what you type it in, but when you get it, right?
Okay.
See, what am I reading here? What font size is that?
Sorry, I can't
You can't see
tell
it.
you because
I think it's probably 1.
yeah.
Now, you're expecting some old boy or old girl somewhere to read a 1 size font email quickly and clearly, and you probably get no more than 1 or 2 minutes reading time from them, which on a phone would be what, 60 to 120 words? So you need to get across with a subject header that gets them to open the email and then takes them no more than, say, a minute, ideally maximum 2, to get the gist of what it is you're saying and asking for, and then hopefully responding to you. And so that's a kind of objective of emails. And even that's a skill that you need for doing your networking by emails and other forms of digital platforms. LinkedIn is a very similar process to emails. You need to have some engagement and then a really succinct set of remarks gets going. And if you are going to run things virtually using Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, etc., make sure your lighting and audio quality, camera, etc., are all in good shape. So just by way of illustration, I don't know if I've got it right as yet, I'm still learning, but I've got one of these speakerphone things with noise cancelling, which I use. But every so often, you need one of these things, right? Headphones. So I've got both options handy. Depending on what's going on around me, I will switch from one to the other. Lighting, I hope, is okay. I hope the background is okay. And I'll do my best to maybe get 10% eye contact with all of you that happen to be looking at the screen. The other challenge is, of course, most screens are blacked out. So that's also an issue in this new world of ours. I wanted to connect up the use of webinars as part of your networking strategy, marketing strategy, right? So there are 2 versions of this. One could be that you host a webinar, and the other one is you get invited to a webinar. Now, if you're hosting it, I learned so much from this company called Corrosion Radar, the privilege to be on their board as a non-exec director. And our entire business plan and funding strategy was based around the team traveling from Cambridge to either Netherlands, Belgium, that connection of petrochemical companies, or to Aberdeen in northern Scotland, to the petrochemical oil and gas companies over there. And then when pandemic happened, nobody was traveling anywhere. The team pivoted with such incredible speed to running webinars. And they were the early adopters in that, I have to say. The webinars were framed as coffee under insulation, right? And you think, what? Coffee with corrosion under insulation? Who's going to go to that? But actually, it turns out hundreds of engineers all over the world in oil and gas companies that were suddenly stopped in their tracks from wanting to do anything or doing anything because things were slowed down. And so they had the time. So the exact target audience that they needed is who they reached out to. And by the end of a series of about 6 of these webinars, they have an active list of about 150 people with whom they're interacting. They've built their own network. The beauty is they're keeping them engaged, not by trying to sell product to them, but by building relationships with them. So for one of the webinars recently was about young women engineers in the oil and gas sector, right? You think, who would attend that? You know, it was an absolute sellout, absolute sellout. So they were building relationships and becoming memorable. and they had a message that they had a bit of thought leadership in what they were doing. And so the webinars has resulted effectively in a campaign-based model. They create the buzz, they run the event, and then they have the capacity to follow up. And they're just basically opening the door to let people come through. That's the beauty of what they've achieved there. And I'm going to them next Wednesday to catch up and see how it's all gone on the 15th. I think that they also have every day, they have a coffee morning for 30 minutes where you don't talk business, you just say hello to each other to work our way through this wretched pandemic lockdown thing. And then every lunchtime also, they have a 30 minutes catch up. Are we all okay? They're looking after each other and each other's mental health through those simple tasks. But they now have a monthly meeting where they have the shareholders also coming in for breakfast. They're really very, very strong on that whole communication thing. And I was talking about reciprocity. So all three of the founders got some help or other from me in different ways. And all three of them have given back in such beautiful ways to me. Praful, who is one of the IIT Madras guy, PhD, etc., now from Cranfield, he has come back and given talks on my courses. Excellent, the academic to the entrepreneur. Mehrdad has introduced me to his brother and his family and to various of his other connections. And they have, as a result of it, invested in one of the startups that I was recommending. And Shiraz, she's the CEO, really dynamic lady. And she has come to inspire people on various talks as well. And we've had such amazing conversations about different things. So no money changing hands over there, no transactions, just a really deep relationship building into a friendship. And that's the kind of thing that makes it all worthwhile. So, Mukta, Premnath, is it possible at this point to randomly allocate the participants into, I don't know, 6 groups of 5, say?
Yeah, we'll try that.
Okay.
It hasn't worked out terribly well in the past.
Okay.
But Neha, would you be able to do this, please?
Sorry.
Into random groups of
Random is perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
so groups of 5, I think.
Yeah, there are 4 or 5, and the exam question is on the screen at the moment.
Yeah.
Is if you are looking to go off networking, what is it you're looking for from?
You don't want to.
any-
Yeah, sorry, you don't want to move them away right now, right? You want them to listen to the questions and then move them into
Yes,
breakout
exactly.
rooms, right? So Neha, you just have to. You have a few minutes before we need to break them into rooms.
Yeah. Okay.
Fine.
I
5.
need 5 breakout rooms. Yeah.
Yeah, 5
Sure.
breakout rooms. Okay.
Sure.
And are randomly allocated, and then
Yeah.
maybe 5 minutes bring them back. Is it Shai?
I've given them 15 minutes in small groups, but even actually, you're right. Maybe you don't need that much time. Maybe 10 minutes is enough.
Yeah. Okay. So
And then,
yeah, I also have a few questions in the previous few slides that you had.
yes, of course.
So maybe we can take those up also, right? Whenever you,
When we come back, or would you like
Yeah.
to do it now?
whenever you're comfortable, we can do it later.
Yeah, let's do it as an overall discussion with all the cameras on.
Okay.
So the exam question is for those of you that want to go off networking. We've talked a lot about reciprocity and sincerity, right? So the question is, what is it you are looking for from a network? What is your immediate need that will help you get through the next 3 months, for example? And in exchange for that, what is it that you can offer? You don't have to offer it to the mentor, but what do you bring? Basically, what is your what's the karmic points that you would have back? What would you give back in some other way that that says, okay, my slate is balanced, right? So that's kind of approach. So have a discussion in your groups for 10 minutes and come back, and then we'll have a debrief and follow up some questions. After which I will tell you the sort of the Cambridge story.
Yeah. So the idea is to put down a list of few things on the left and few things on the right, isn't it?
Basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
So and please put it on your chat boxes so that you have it ready to discuss or in a note somewhere. Yeah. Neha, can you try the breakout, please?
Yes, I'm creating the rooms now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the rooms are now open. Please click join on your screen.
Can I please request people here to join the respective rooms? Mr. Pawan Kumar, you have been allotted 2 different rooms. You just have to see your name and join that particular room.
Yes, I'll join.
Yeah, sure. Ramji, did you see your room? Neha, I think Ramji needs to be allotted a room.
No, has been allotted room 5. Actually, I can see him in room 5. He has to click join on his screen to join the room.
Yeah, Ramji, can you please click on join? Piyush, same for you. You have to join
Yeah,
room.
he's in room 2. Piyush is in room 2.
Is not ticker. I think this is this who is Firefly's AI note taker? Can you please join room 2? Piyush, you can go to room number 2.
We can offer him the turn.
Sorry?
Mugdhan ma'am, will you just tell me when to close the rooms? After coordinating with Premnath sir.
Yeah, I think 10 minutes. So
Yeah, you can join. I think where Premnath sir's room. He is in room
5.
5. Yeah.
Hello, will we be back? Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, maybe can you just step into that room and tell them?
Yeah, Neha, you have to broadcast that message.
Yeah, I have broadcasted the message that we will be closing at 5:57. So next 2-3 minutes, I'll close all the rooms. The message had flashed in all the rooms.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm closing all the rooms now and asking participant to join the main session.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you move them out on your own?
No, it's saying that they'll be back in 60 seconds.
Okay. We can't hear you, Shai. You're on mute.
Yeah, let's have a little bit of a discussion now. There were 6 groups, I think. Is that right? Or 5 groups?
Yeah.
5, yeah.
5. So maybe group by group, you can just give a 1-minute summary for each group of the main points that came up. And let's pick it up from there.
Yeah. Mugdha, would you know which are the groups? Then we can take it from there. Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
Shai, is that okay?
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, our group consisted of Sandeep, Malvika, and Sai Prasad. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just putting it on the chat box here. Should I?
Yes.
Yeah. So here are, I think it's already come up over there. Sorry, our points seem to be already on the chat box. Everybody. Yeah. So this is what need and what we can offer, right? So we thought we need advising on milestone planning, connects to people who can help refine the value proposition, business model mentoring, introduction to investors, introduction to other mentors, insights on somebody wanted to get more insights on how to use the triple chasm model, experience sharing on specific programs. Okay, like for example, in funding programs and so on, whether what do we offer, case studies for the classroom, insights in a market or a business, satisfaction of helping an important problem, your commitment as our commitment to solve a larger problem in society and not drop the ball in between and ensure a high chance of success, visibility for the mentor as well, sincere recognition of contribution, identifying what created value and expressing it and acknowledging it. Connects in our own personal networks. For example, in your case, if you were the mentor, our team said that we could bring connects to the Indian R&D ecosystem, Indian networks, and so on and so forth, right?
Yes.
Connect to connects for one of your other mentees. For example, we might have some other mentees. Good fit in need of startup and expertise of mentor. I think some mentors value the opportunity to contribute usefully in a very appropriate problem, in the sense which fits their own work and their own aspirations, right? So that opportunity to do that, and of course things like equity and so on. That's what our group put down. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think you probably covered all the ground that other teams will also.
No, let's hear from others. So maybe Bala, you were in another team. So your team, one of your team members can.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, Prerna. You covered exhaustively. So we were in a team with Nitin, Pawan, and Soma. For a start, we just had a round of introductions in terms of our backgrounds. Second thing that I was the only startup and the rest of them are part of the incubators. So I was kind of touch basing in terms of what my needs are. So we're a company focused on Ayurveda-based solutions combining AI. So based on the backgrounds of our mentors, of the people who are present in the group, we sort of touch base if there are any aligning areas and the contacts that which I could leverage. So one of the things that came up is Nitin was from a social science background, very interesting. He worked with a lot of NGOs earlier. So we were touch basing to see how we could perhaps take Ayurveda to places which don't have medical care facilities using mobile vans, etc. And Pawan was from CSR. There are some colleagues who are working on various companies, etc. So we exchanged connects, contact information to take the discussions forward.
Super. It sounded to me a little bit like networking was going on as much as a discussion about networking. So that's kind of awesome, actually.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that not everybody's met everybody yet on the program.
No, they have met, but perhaps very brief introduction or something we can do.
Okay. Super. Do we have any other contributions coming in?
Shai, which breakout room were you in?
Number 2, I think.
So I was in Shai's breakout room.
Yes.
Yes, Saurav, go ahead. You can.
So what we discussed was one of the, in my case, what I wanted from an investor or prospective networking partner was scientific advisors and scientific know-how. On top of that, opportunity to invest with a team working on environmentally sustainable means. And what I had to offer in return was the product itself. In addition to that, the opportunity to work for a cause as a social brownie points. And Angelus was also in our group. So since both of the companies are working at environmentally sustainable products, there's a chance for these companies to offer the investor an access to the carbon credits market. So this is, I'm not sure how concrete this is, but in the future, in the next 10 to 15 years, there's a chance that there can be a carbon credits market to offset the carbon footprint of companies which cannot exactly reduce the carbon footprint based on the Paris Agreement or based on the requirements of the country itself. So let's say a company is carbon negative and they have a surplus of carbon credits. So this is something that they can offer to the network that they have with other investors or other companies, wherein they want to offset the carbon footprint by taking credits from a company working on environmentally sustainable means. And another was, as Shai helped us to realize, was not only do we approach an investor just for money, but we can approach them for their access to lawyers, their access to accountants, and they can in turn get an opportunity to mentor and get involved with a great team. And there's also opportunity to tech transfer between two of the companies that an investor can be invested in. Let's say Angelus itself has a product, and then there's another company in another country which is planning on developing something similar. So the investor can connect these two companies, and there can be a tech transfer, or there can be a collaboration that could come up from that meeting, that network.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Thank you.
How about you? I think Adesh, were you on one of the other groups or somebody else?
Dr. Somnath Roy and Sonali Roy, they both were in one group. If you want
Okay,
to talk
so
about
maybe
your
Dr.
group.
Somnath Roy can talk about it.
Yeah, Shantani will say on behalf of us. She was in that
please.
group.
Anthony took a note on the collective.
Sure, Shantani.
Yeah. So it was a very in general discussion that we had. I had Dr. Sonali Roy, Dr. Tulsi, Dr. Somnath Roy, and one more person, I'm forgetting the name. Okay.
Dr. Tinisami.
Yes. So I believe except for me and Dr. Somnath Roy, rest were all incubators. So for the need for incubators would be to understand what exactly the startups need, and also what other stakeholders are looking for. Apart from that, they would also help in bringing in more visibility to the mentees. I think what the startups need and everything Dr. Premnath has already listed down in details. For need of startups, the main focus would be to get mentored on the various aspects of starting up and various other things, and also a platform to get introduced to the investors. Offer that the incubators can give is help in getting mentorship for the startups, right from the starting till reaching the end. And the offers that startups can give is helping peers in getting technical expertise and getting some back in return, bringing in more visibility to the incubator or the mentors, and also give out equity based exchanges.
I think that's a very interesting thing, Shantani. Thank you for that. If I can jump in momentarily here, is you reminded me of something I used to talk about a lot in my teaching days, which is if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money.
Okay.
And you have just said something very nice, which is that one of the things that you'll be looking for from a mentor is all sort of the intangible knowledge and know-how and so on, how to start a company and how to grow it. That means you're asking somebody for something beyond their wallet, right, or their handbag or whatever. And that engages people way more than asking for something transactional, like become a customer, become my whatever, right? You're asking for their knowledge and for their insight. And if you're then seen to be acting on it, and they feel like by default, they've become your kind of accidentally slipped into becoming a mentor. They will talk about you so much more, and they will get so much from it without a lot of words having to be said. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Okay, thank you. So the last room, I think Neha has compiled the points for room number 4.
Yeah. Hi. Our group consisted of Suman, Lokesh, Nikhil, Manjusha, and Neha. And in terms of what we need, our funding opportunities, some contacts for vendor development for contract manufacturing, a network of investors, board members, advisors, and experts. And in terms of what we can offer, our industry and clinical experience or expertise, connects from the industry or profession, and infrastructure.
Excellent. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Dr. Prema, I was with Saurav, Kuljit, and Dr. Shailendra. So from incubator stage, I put down 2 points. In terms of what we can ask is the awareness and mentoring to the startups, students, and faculties. And in terms of the second column, the provide, we can provide a stage for the investors to have the investment opportunity in the upcoming startups, network with the alumni and the faculty. That's all.
Okay, great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, quickly, you had some questions, Premnath. Maybe now is a good time to take them.
Yeah. So, I wanted to pick on a few themes. I also have some comments.
Yes.
So one is, many startups and many, especially in the Indian context, they come in this and in the science-based startups space, you find that they come from academic backgrounds. Many of them probably would be quite conservative in what they have to speak, right? They may have notions of sounding artificial, or they might have a feeling of shyness or fear, or a fear of making a fool of themselves, right? Or feeling of not being ready yet to communicate. There's a level sense of, oh, this person is so senior, high, whatever it is, right? Or getting and also being able to attract attention in a crowd, right? So what are your comments on those? How does somebody get over those things? Because these are practical issues that many of the startups face, right? And especially in there are a lot of cultural things associated with this as well, including gender related issues and so on. So do you want to comment on that a little bit in terms of practical insights on how do you break through some of these things? And when I've seen that you do a great job at when you're teaching some of these things as Ignite or the program and so on. I was wondering if there's some formal way to inculcate these, the ability to network seamlessly.
Yeah, so we do have in the in the old school methodologies, of networking, which is when you're going to see somebody or do something at an event, or you contact them and try to go see them, or arrange to have a cup of coffee with them, or something like that. So different levels. So if you're talking about breaking the ice, if you like, at an event, is that kind of the start point from of your question? As distinct from, let's say, arranging to have a coffee with somebody by email and then meeting them somewhere and then having a discussion. So if I compare the old with the current, as opposed to old with the new, just the way it used to be and the way it is now, is nowadays, when you come on a call, as was the case a moment ago, some of us have to wear masks because of where we are. Some of us are traveling because that's what so-called work at home is all about, trying to multitask. Some of us are in our gardens or our balconies. There's all sorts of stuff going on. So very, very difficult in that. So how do you break the ice? Well, the advice we used to give, and I think it's still relevant even in the new virtual technology world, is ask the other person what they do. Nobody likes anything more than talking about themselves, right? So you might make your pitch, hello, I'm so-and-so. The problem I'm trying to solve is climate change, and my technology is waste remediation, or I have a cure for cancer, or whatever it is, your 30-second thing. And then say, but could I ask you what is it that you do in your work, or what brings you to this event or something? You ask that question, hopefully they get sufficiently interested, they will start to warm up and have that conversation back in your direction. So rather than you going into sort of the broadcast, this is me, I need your help, and I need you to put money in, I need a lawyer, I need an accountant, whatever it is, will you help me? And they go, no. Or it just becomes aggressive. Or the flip side is simply asking them a few questions and engaging in a conversation. It's a very different game. You're right, Premnath, about being aggressive or assertive or being shy. Just putting the gender thing to one side. This call with the medtech company I was talking about, the Californian connection through San Diego, all the three Americans who were there were very upfront about what they had done, what they had achieved, what they were doing. They're also not afraid to say, yeah, I'm happy to work with you on a pro bono basis for 6 months. then beyond that, if you need something, we'll have to discuss it again. No shame whatsoever in saying that. Absolutely clear, and why not? The British guys, on the other hand, did not know how to react to that. They thought that was a bit aggressive, right? So we are dealing with cultural issues. I have been in events where I've tried to introduce myself. I've given the long-winded discussion and tried to be humble about it. And there's typically been a Californian in the room. He's told me everything that he can, blowing his trumpet as loudly as possible. And it's a very different approach. So we do struggle with that. It's true culturally. I don't have an easy fix for that, other than to say, ask the other person a few questions to get them talking to you, get them relaxed. You will also relax as a result of that, and maybe some decent conversation can take place. On the gender issue, Premna, is much more difficult for me to answer because I'm an old guy. But let me just stop for a moment and have you respond to my initial reaction.
No, I think that is very true. If you're willing to listen more, you get. I mean, it's very often that you can have a longer conversation, right? And that is indeed true. And it's actually quite easy to do that if there is a little bit of sincerity in the effort to interact. And if it's not, if there's not a monkey on your back continuously telling you to get something out of the transaction or of the discussion, it's a lot easier to do as well. The second thing that I find very often from my personal experience is that if you have yourself a notion internally that everybody has something interesting to offer, it makes it quite easy to talk and network. So a little bit of generosity in thinking in terms of giving credit to other people and their abilities and their own what they bring to the table, irrespective of how young or old they are, or how powerful they are or not powerful they are, or I think that goes a long way in building some of those connects. I have seen situations where some startup founders, especially with very strong scientific backgrounds, thinking that discussion is not necessary just because they think they know it, right? So that is another issue that I have seen. You want to comment, Shai?
Yes, certainly. So 2 points. One is in the question of what do we give back? Okay. Now, Premnath, you and I go back a long way. Not as long as some of my other connections because you're still a young man, but we do go back a way. And you very kindly invited me to the NCL Venture Center. And then we had some interactions. And you gave me something that was so valuable to me, right? And it was not money. It was not connection to the Prime Minister's office or anything like that. You told me about the concert in Pune. If I'm not mistaken, Bhimsen Joshi's school, right?
Yeah. So
and I believe the Gandharva.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I believe that stopped now past midnight because of some local activism about clock. And so I don't know if I'm up to date on that. But as a result of that, I went off for a couple of hours to listen to some amazing music. And that connected us on a totally different level. And I've never forgotten that, because how often do I come to Pune? And what are my chances that I'll be there again at this time that there's some amazing music going on? So when we say, what have we got to give back to somebody? And the reason that Premnath told me about that is because I had expressed an interest in music. And that is because we had had a conversation about it. So here I am, I don't know how many years later, Premnath, working with you again on a project, which is such a thrill for me. That's because of those little conversations that took place in this sense, right? And this has got nothing to do with science, technology, money, shares, equity, all that stuff. That's all taken for granted. That's all happening. There's some other level at which we're connected. The second thing about the value of other people, and having, dare I say it, academic or scientific arrogance that we know more than the other person, that is a real problem in this field. And my one example is of a very, very bright young woman who had done her networking course and come with a little black book and a name of people that she wanted to meet and so forth. And I was standing next to a chap. He was as tall as I am. That's about 6'3", whatever that is in metric. And we were chatting away. And she came along, and she was maybe 30 centimeters shorter than both of us. And she looked straight past me, as if I was not there. And she talked to this chap because he was on her list, asked her what he did in more detail, and found that he was some kind of senior manager in a bank. And she said, "Oh, I don't need anybody from a bank right now in my conversation." And literally, without saying thank you, goodbye, anything like that, turned around and walked away after having pitched her idea to him. He turned around to me and he smiled ruefully. Said, "If only she'd stayed another 30 seconds, I might have introduced her to my sister, who's the CEO of the company that she's looking to talk to."
Yep.
Right. And there was some big FMCG brand in which his sister was. You know, he's a high-achieving bank manager. His family members are also high-achieving other managers. And she just lost the route to somebody. And those sort of mistakes, like if this session is called Networking 101, we could also have another session called Mistakes 101 that entrepreneurs make when they're networking, right?
Shai, do you want to also comment on how do you get attention in a crowd? How do you, be visible? What are the ways by which, how can you move up on the visibility list?
That is so hard. You're right, and I think if I may at this point, I think it's even harder for women than it is for men in this field. And because what I've seen, I don't know, the ladies the women in the session can tell us more perhaps, but it is really, really tough to be less visible. And it might be that there are some pitching events which are taking place as part of some networking event, just to give a really strong pitch at that and to become visible through that. If one is trying to network, identify the 3 or 4 people you need and have somebody introduce you to them, right? Somebody that they know. So, like on LinkedIn, you are second on the network or some nonsense like that. So something similar. So because you are part of this wonderful network that NCL Venture Center has created, you say, "Listen, I need to meet XYZ. Would you be willing to introduce me to so-and-so?" And thereby you cut through the queue, basically. That would be the way. Mm-hmm. For those of you that go to busy temples in India, you know how you pay a little extra money to break the queue. Same principle.
I don't know how many slides you have, Shai.
For another dozen. I'm happy to take some questions. I mean, okay. I think it's been nice for people to hear about the Cambridge thing because there are some more lessons to be learned.
Yeah, and there is a question on, of course, Saurabh, you seem to be talking about, we entered what he writes is we entered the ecosystem just in time for COVID. So we never got any experience of any networking event, but pre-COVID, what are the kind of events where founders could be in the same room as mentors, advisors, investors? By the way, Saurabh, don't forget your classroom in college itself as a networking exercise, right? Or your hostels that you were in and so on and so forth. Don't underestimate those networks as well. So it's not that we have not been part of networks. Maybe you have not been part of any formal networking events for entrepreneurs, mixers, but you will recall that our get together with all the faculty and AIM team and everybody and all the startups was also one of those mixer events actually. But anyway, Shai, you want to answer that?
So how to get back in, what kinds of events? I think when we're back to so-called normal times, whatever that is, I would encourage you to go to events which have lots of entrepreneurs in them. Like-minded, get the practice, get the keep your expectations low, but just keep meeting people and getting the practice of doing it. So, and there are a lot of those. I mean, there's some excellent events organized by folks like Indus Entrepreneurs, Thai. So become a member of that. There must be other similar organizations now in India. There certainly are elsewhere. Our little city of Cambridge has got more than 40 such networks going on, and barely a population of 150,000. So a very busy place. So find out. I think the NCL Venture Center would be the route into all these events. I suspect you give out regular information on that, don't you, Premnath, from your team?
Yeah, we do. We run a lot of events.
Yeah.
Many of them are networking events as well. If I just was thinking through Shai some of these points before the talk today. If you look at how maybe if I look at some of the startups in our network, and what are the kind of networks they're benefiting from and for what purpose, I thought that might be, I can point out a few and then you can comment on those as well. So we have different platforms by which people meet each other, right? Of course, there are physical events which we have been running in the past, and now we are running online events. For example, under the BIRAC Regional Bioinnovation Center, we actually run something called a mentor mixer, where we try to get a whole bunch of mentors in a field introduced to a whole bunch of startups, right? Now, that is usually field specific, and where it is interesting is that people generally, at least it narrows down the space a little bit in terms of the field. So it could be, say, just medical devices, okay, and in which case people who are interested in that field from either the industry perspective or from the investment perspective, and entrepreneurs in that space sort of meeting each other. That is quite important. One of the other ones which I find, of course, is our peer network. Okay, you'll be amazed how useful a peer network can be, and it gets richer if more people contribute. So, for example, a simple WhatsApp group of all of us sharing information on what are the new funding programs coming in, or sharing each other's success stories, and specific things that they can leverage, or a specific question, where can I get this done, right? Do you have comments on a particular type of task that I want done, and what are the options I have? What about, can I get my prototyping done in China? Does somebody have experience doing that? What are the issues I should, it's unbelievable how how helpful that is. And amongst entrepreneurs, that peer network is extremely valuable. So because that's hands-on, it is very direct. If somebody's just faced the issue, and so they are willing to share immediately and generously, if you set up the right environment where sharing is possible. I just wanted to give a few more examples. There are cases where we find that somebody has pitched a proposal, and the investor reaches out at the back end, prospective investor, to check up on some of those companies. And it's not necessarily the incubator. It can also be certain technical mentors associated with the incubator, people who might be aware of that particular technology and give a sort of a quiet, unbiased opinion of where it stands and so on. So in that context, there have been situations where we have encouraged our startups to keep a few key people in that field well aware of what you're doing and where you stand out compared to other technologies in that space. Because the question would be, how does this person stand out? Is it a credible technology? Without information, the person will say, oh, I don't know enough about it, or I can't really give you very precise information on how they stand out. So sometimes you have to actually spend time talking to some of these experts to just help them understand how you stand out. And some of them will get so excited about it, that, oh, your results look really promising. How can I help? In fact, that might also come up. We have seen this also happen in committees. You will be surprised in even all the funding committees and so on. You can never predict who will be there and who has what opinion of you or your team or your board members and so on. It's a good idea to sometimes keep people informed. And some of our startups periodically or maybe even annually send out an update email to their well-wisher group, broadly defined well-wishers, saying, this is what we have done. Okay, and this is so the importance of annual reporting, or at least putting down a summary of things that might be of interest or some achievements, is quite useful.
Yes.
We also find that some of the key co-founders and key employees very often come by referrals. It is never by just going and hunting around. So that referral network very often can be friends, family, others who know you, and so on. So that is another set of places where we find that quite critical. Reaching out to the right decision maker in the purchase process, and the real customer, the person who's going to really take the decision, finding the right person often requires referrals.
Absolutely.
Right? You never are able to just, you can't just do a blind search on the net and find out who's the right person. In fact, just today, I have given 2 pointers to 2 people to a startup on who could be the potential decision maker in that particular domain. For pool of new employees, many startups network with specific research institutions and so on and so forth. In order to build that network over a period of time, they'll go and give talks, participate in some classroom sessions, because they know that they are going to go back and seek some help or request for interns and so on. In fact, I know at least one person in this cohort who is leveraging that network very well. Beyond that, yeah.
Some of these lessons will come out from
what you're going to speak. Yeah.
About the
okay, sure. Yeah.
We'll sleep on that. Unless there's anything specific you want to say.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point out from my observations, and I think I'll stop here. I think you can continue, please, and then we'll take it from there at the end if there are some more questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just in response to the questions which are there, one about anchoring the discussion, I think is a really, really important point. You go to a networking event all bursting to say what you want to say and learn what you want to learn, and somewhere along the line you're completely derailed by some other conversations. Don't allow that to frustrate you too much. Just make sure that you're able to follow up. First thing is the group of people you want to talk to, are they the ones that are derailing it, or are they just part of an interesting conversation? It doesn't really matter. If it does matter, make sure you get in sufficiently to say, look, we didn't have the chance to discuss this thing that's on my mind. Could we have a 15-20 minute phone call or Zoom chat or whatever the format is now? Because I'm really keen to get your views on it, right? And that's a sufficiently amount of flattery, hopefully, which will get you back in to have a much more one-to-one pointed conversation rather than worrying about it at an event. Events are just door openers, so don't worry too much about that. And the inability to anchor the discussion, frankly speaking, that happens to me all the time at home when my children, wife, and various families, everyone's talking, and I start a conversation and it goes off somewhere. I suspect it happens to all of you at home. It's exactly the same thing at a network. Just find the right moment in which to go in for the kill. Okay, so that's probably enough on that for the time being. Let me share a screen with you, which is this device here, and do that, and do this. And hopefully you can see what's going on. Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I need to get rid of this thing, minimize that. Okay, good. So thank you for that. So all of that is good practical stuff. And Premna, thank you very much for adding to that. I just wanted to just kindly, sort of at your request, give a really practical example of what impact building a good network can have. So it's not just about networking at an event or with people to get your business off the ground, but also becoming part of a network and the long-term gains that can come from it. So here's the start point of that. So just briefly, Cambridge, the small city, some of you may have been to it, we're about 50 miles north of London, and this particular chart comes from a book on the Cambridge phenomenon And it picks up the story in 1950 with a company called PYE, P-Y-E, which actually started in 1896. It was a spin-out from Scientific Instruments. Then you see aerospace came through, then computer-aided design came in the 60s, inkjet came in the 70s, and then software started to develop, Acorn computers started to come out, computing biotech started on top of that in the 80s and 90s, and then semiconductors, plastic electronics have started. Then finally, after a lot of work with Greg Winter, humanizing the monoclonal antibodies of Cesar Milstein, you had CAT startup and various other companies coming out of that. And now bit by bit, you've gone into sensors, nanotech, green tech, clean tech, and so forth, right? Yeah, bioinformatics. As a bioinformatics on the back of the Human Genome Program, which of course started many years before that. So, and you can see this if you were, this was a bar chart of industrial growth, of wealth being created, jobs being created. It roughly follows this track of these long columns of sectors. How did that all begin? Well, interestingly, the origin of the species, if you like, the origin of the entrepreneurial species of Cambridge is also goes back to Darwin, the son of Charles Darwin, a fellow called Horace Darwin. And he got his degree from Trinity College with something called a little go. It's a little exam. Apparently, he didn't know much about the classics, which was a big thing in those days, and devoted himself to mathematics and other scientific studies. So mathematics and scientific studies were slightly less valued than knowing your Greek and your Latin, right? And the little go, I don't know if the little go exam in those days was, so young man, what is the name of your father? And off he went. Anyway, he then went off to work, 1871, came back in 1881, and started his company, Cambridge Scientific Instruments. And that was the start of it. It was very, very early days. And then by 1896, a company called Pi came out. Those of you that have got your headphones on, be a little bit careful. I'm going to play a soundtrack now, if it works. And some of you will immediately recognize it.
We can't hear this.
Hoping it's coming. It's streaming. Okay, let's see if it works. Were you able to hear that?
Yeah, sure.
Did you recognize the tune?
All India Radio's opening tune. Yeah.
Exactly. So those of you that recognize it will all also remember, maybe your grandparents, your parents had Pi radios. So those were developed in Cambridge, and I remember listening to Akashwani, All India Radio, Carnatic music, etc. In Mombasa on shortwave radio on a Pi that looked something like the one you've seen in the picture. And so Pi got the contract for radios because it was the BBC had been formed, the British Broadcasting Corporation, to put out news about its war efforts. I'm not saying it's propaganda or fake news. I'm just saying it was news about the war efforts going on, and they needed some partner organization. And Pi, which had come out of Cambridge Scientific Instruments, developed that. And guess what? Some of the people that worked at BBC had worked in Cambridge, and so the connection goes forward. Okay, so that's all good news from the 1890s and early 20th century. But what about the recent stuff? This is also about human connections. The chap on the left-hand side is a fellow called Clive Sinclair, is a very colorful character around Cambridge. He came up with the first ever tiny little calculator using LEDs. I remember it was 120 pounds, the size of a small packet of Charminar, basically. And his marketing guy was the fellow on the right, Chris Curry. Chris Curry was in the radar center in the UK. Joined Clive as a marketing guy, and they actually recycled an old barn, corn building, into manufacturing. And they had crowdfunding. Okay, so the way they would do it is they would put advertising in the newspapers, collect all the orders, collect all the money, and then send the shipping order to China or somewhere to make the calculators for them. I remember it because I bought one of those things for 120 pounds. And then Cassia, of course, was about 10 pounds a few years later. Then these two fell out with each other big time. And again, comes to physical resources. This is a scene of the Cambridge Market Square. And the building, the picture on the right is all the buildings facing King's College. And all these characters were coming together and forming things and doing research and in computer science and so on. And because Sinclair had gone into financial trouble, a little bit naughty of them to try and dodge the banks. They were playing with computers, but in the room behind them, there was a man called Herman Hauser and others in the lab, Andy Hopper and others, who were playing around with computers and local area networks and so forth. And it's a lovely story about Bill Gates visiting them at some point and saying something along the lines that, local area networks, waste of time. So they were making kits, right? And so there was a bit of headhunting, and Chris jumped ship, left Clive, and joined Herman because Clive had decided to make a video screen-based micro television. So the thing would be about 2 inches. What's that in 50 centimeters? No, 50 mil screens. And he left Chris out of it, as Chris was not seen as the heavyweight. And Chris, in the meantime, had formed a friendship with Herman because they'd been meeting each other. And they formed Acorn Computers. This is on the grass on the front of in King's College. So in the meantime, these two colleagues, Roger Wilson and Steve Ferber, were developing a platform, basically. Were developing a platform, basically, a microprocessor that used less energy than Intel were producing. That powered up the Acorn computer. And I remember going to the Christmas launch of the Archimedes, which was breathtaking at the time. And it was their chip that ultimately powered the famous Nokia phone, which gave us all the capacity to have mobile phones in our hands compared to the great big bricks that were coming from Intel.
Last session.
Sorry, there's a disturbance. Please, Lakshmi, Tulsi. Yeah, okay.
Multitasking, listening to some other course at the same time.
No, it's okay.
What am I competing with? TED Talks?
No, I think probably she was just informing somebody that there's a class in progress. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So these two characters gave us that. Steve Ferber, I think, is retiring as professor of computer science in Liverpool, and Roger has retired and is doing other things now. So the point about this was that about networks and networking is that BBC had come out originally into war period. They needed a radio to broadcast news. And now that obviously the network continues, and one of their reporters saw that another company was being formed on the same basis as Acorn Computers, and he put out a blog or news item on the BBC website because it mimicked the school computer which had been launched in the late 70s. And this is the so-called Raspberry Pi, right? Some of you are no doubt familiar with Raspberry Pi. This is an absolute sellout. I think they sold 5,000-10,000 of them overnight because the momentum had built up. And this is again about meeting the needs of a customer. There's no question, my three dots, business, personal, and social. The business need was there. BBC needed to do something. They're also an amazing first customer for some of these electronic prototypes. They needed microphones, they needed loudspeakers, they needed amplifiers, they needed shortwave, high, long-form radio signals. All these things were coming from universities and research groups to enable them to broadcast, right? Antennas and all sorts of things. So there is a need that is being driven by an agency like the BBC. But equally, many of the people in the BBC have studied at Cambridge and elsewhere, but also the connections, that's why the connections go back. So from that, BBC, the Acorn computer then flopped because of inventory problems of importing from China and elsewhere. And about a dozen people were made redundant. And they sat in this bar in a place called Burwash Manor, this iconic photo of the foundation of a company called ARM, ARM. And they're the microprocessor, they're the fabless design company, fabless manufacturer of microchips. And I believe there are billions and billions of microchips in the market in all our devices that have come out. And some of these original characters are still there. And I'm in touch with one or two of them. One, a fellow called Jamie Urquhart, who's the nearest to you on the picture on the left-hand side. He and I are very good friends, and he often teaches on Ignite and Impulse and various other places. And anytime there's any question about a microprocessor type enterprise, I know I can go back to Jamie and get a quick 10, 15 minutes from him and his assessment of it. Right? So, and these guys together have formed this unbelievable network. So the people that came together at Acorn Computers, which was Herman's second company, all the ones you see in yellow are graduates of Cambridge. They all formed around Acorn. They all came together to form Acorn Computers. They were driven by a vision. They were already friends with each other. And then when Acorn went bust, as you can see from the arrows, it spread out like an expanding universe into all sorts of things. But so many of them came together over and over again to start companies. Herman, I think, made the most money and became a venture capitalist, Amadeus Capital Partners. And he now has a fund in Austria as well, and is currently in isolation in New Zealand on his great big farm over there because his wife is from there. Why is that important or useful for me to know he's in New Zealand? It's just this sort of general knowledge of where people are. You'll see if can I wipe my, you see the Harun Ahmed here. He's in the physics department. And you see, is my cursor hovering?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so Andy Hopper name also you will find in many, many places, right? And he became also head of computer science at Cambridge. He was a professor there. And most recently, I think he's been the treasurer of the Royal Society. So like this is like seriously heavyweight people, right? And therefore they're working together over and over again. David Cleverly is another character who came out of data science basically, and has started many companies. He was the chairman of Abcam, which took antibodies and became the Amazon for antibodies, if you like. First billion-dollar company out of Cambridge. Ray Anderson has started Bango and many other firms around, and he's been invested by Herman, as you can see. So, and Sir Alec Brewer over here was the vice chancellor of the university. And Richard Friend is a professor of physics, Cavendish professor of physics. He's the man behind the plastic electronics world. He and Herman were students together doing their PhDs at the Cavendish labs. And so that's how far back they go. So this is a story about the enduring nature of becoming part of a network rather than just simply networking. Now, what has this meant to Cambridge? So there you see Herman's company there, Acorn Computers. You see CAD there next to Herman's name, bang in the middle, and the name Charles Lang. So CAD is a computer-aided design center. So Charles Lang came back from MIT to establish the CAD Center, and the CAD Center became quite an engine, actually, of companies in Cambridge. If you follow that line, you'll find the name Richard Green at about 10 o'clock, going in the direction of 10 o'clock. Richard Green was part of that story through Cambridge Interactive. He then created a company called Small World, which sold to GE, and he then created a company called 10 Sales, through which to investigate potential startups. And that resulted in Andy Hopper and him coming together to create UbiSense, which you can see if I hover the cursor. UbiSense is a sensor company, and Richard has recently stepped down from it. So is Andy Hopper, and the company is moving on from strength to strength. And because Richard became available, I invited him because I had known him. And by the way, he had sponsored my Diwali parties a couple of times, big events, fundraising events, which I had run in Cambridge. So I got to know some of these guys. And Richard then accepted my invitation to meet the team at Corrosion Radar. He's now an awesome chairman of Corrosion Radar. And he has brought with him a finance director of a quality that there's no way I could have got him through headhunters, right? But he's part of his network. And so Richard Green is now chair of a company which I have helped to start. And he came out of this ecosystem. And that's enduring networks. Charles Lang, by the way, his brother Jack, who features here, Jack has an outdoor pizza oven. I would kill for one of those, right? And Jack is a full-on foodie. He owned a 3-star Michelin restaurant, but he made money with Herman on setting up the first ever electronic share information company. So E-Trade bought them up. There it is, E-Trade, so it's quite right. And Jack has been living on that for a while. And Charles Lang and he together very much at the heart of it. And I've now persuaded Charles Lang to collect data for me from the CAD Center alumni to hand it over to the University Library for the archive of Cambridge innovation history that I'm working on locally. So this is really at the heart of it. Alex Van Summeren runs Herman's venture capital fund. So I know it's a lot of information to give you, but this is just to say, look, this is how things endure. And the networks come for all kinds of reasons. By the way, John Snyder made a wonderful exit recently and owns now, literally owns a castle in the Lake District of the UK, where his wife runs remediation programs for interfaith communication between the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, and various others. So he's gone off in that direction. So there we are. And what has been the impact of all of that? Is more and more companies forming and reforming, and the people getting more and more engaged. I'll be honest, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've lost touch with this crowd, and I can't wait to get stuck back in again because they are so much fun to work with. Because nothing is impossible for them. They may say no to you, but nothing is impossible. And they work together often. So the academic contribution to networking and networks are how strong are the ties, and is the drift from social to business or business to social? Which way does the link work, right? How is it, what is the progress of these linkages? So those are the Nahapiat and Ghoshal and various others have published on that. I don't want to go down the academic route, but just to say that networking and networks resulting in social capital, things that you can treasure over a long period of time, long-term asset. As I said, they worked with each other many, many times. And these are other short diagrams, so showing connections to 3 or more companies, 2 or more companies, etc. And you see Lang and Garrett and various others. Lawrence Garrett on the right-hand side, by the way, was at 3i, the venture capitalist. That's why he features there. Stan Boland is a genius. He's on the top of the picture. He's done many other companies. And Alex Van Summeren. Mackay sadly has passed away, but he was also in sustainability and electricals, etc., etc. So a whole stack of names here, and you'll find Urquhart I've mentioned before, Anderson I've mentioned before, and now Malhotra has come in. So 1 or 2 Indian names are gradually creeping in there. So what does all this mean? So these are what you call network nodes, which is what Premnath was alluding to. That's why I interrupted you, Premnath. So these are the people you get to need to know, and they need to know you so that they can talk about you to their networks, right? And you can't find out who the network node is just by pitching at them. You need to get to know them by asking them questions and engaging in a conversation. Yeah, this is just some more pictures of the sheer intensity of their enthusiasm. I mean, you can't stop these guys, right? This is incredible. And by the way, there is a parallel to this entire group that I will tell you in a moment. So I was playing with an academic idea of, I think it's, of speciation. Because it came up in some entrepreneurship academic paper, but how people were going from microprocessors into tools for mobile telecoms, into internet trading, into biopharma or polymers and organics and enabling software. And it is at the intersection of these technologies that these amazing things that happen, magical things that happen. And so we have to redefine ourselves from being market segment oriented, industry segment oriented, to thinking about what space do we want to occupy, by thinking to ourselves, what problem are we trying to solve and whose problem are we trying to solve? And here, as you see, Arrakis, Alexa, Cellcentric, and Danio Labs, all of them in one form or another, I think, have had investment from Herman. So Alexa, of course, sold to Illumina, for $600 million. And that was David Klenemal and Shankar Balasubramaniam who created the gene sequencing machine when they were there, right? There's a whole electronics, technology, etc. They're 2 professorial rock stars anyway in their own right, therefore easy for them to raise money. CDT and Plastic Logic came again from the interface of physics and chemistry, and so it goes on around this chart. So, and people are able to move across, the so-called sector agnostic. What do we learn from this group? Well, they are serial and multiple. They don't just invest in this and then go buy a big house. They might do that as well, or a fancy car, but they're willing to go back in and become business angels. They go back in as investors. They do a lot of pro bono activity. And this is the magic of what I was very proud to have achieved in 2003, 2005, mapping all these folks and then asking them to come and teach our students at Cambridge University and mentor them. And I said, look, I can never pay you the amount of money you folks earn from your entrepreneurial activity, but I would like to ask for 1 week of your time per year maximum to come and teach and inspire. And they absolutely loved it. So there's my networking story. I was asking them to come and teach, but what were they getting in return? They were getting access to some of the brightest students on the planet. And their ego was being flattered, right? So I had a fantastic relationship with all of them. And ultimately, because of that ecosystem of the network, Cambridge is kind of a low-risk place to take high risks, because if things fail, and I know of one entrepreneur who was fired from his own startup actually recently, Indian fellow as it happens, he's now started another company entirely because he can in Cambridge. And it's not unique to Cambridge. We just mapped it out. Now, just by the way, those of you that are familiar with Wipro as a company and the founders of Wipro, you will know that there's about half a dozen people who came out of the Indian Institute of Science to create the project which became Wipro. I met the folks at Bangalore. We did a mapping. It's with some academic at IISCs. Sadly, I don't have that data. But it turns out that between them, at the time we spoke to them, they had started over 100 companies between them, somewhere between India and Silicon Valley. And that was an ecosystem based out of 4 or 5 people. And there was a hardcore group of something like 30 or 40 of them who were repeatedly starting things, right? So that map, I don't think it will come out, sadly, but I'm hoping maybe the accelerators and incubators on this program, Premnath, can start a project similar to the one that UPAR and I did and build these maps of the networks, because it makes a difference. They make money, and we have a mentality that we all win together. So that's my pitch, Premnath. Happy to take a few questions if I've got a few minutes. If we're running a bit late,
yes,
sorry.
Yes, no, thank you. This is wonderful.
There's my contact detail. And there's sort of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah, any questions, please do list on the chat box and I'll take them up. In the meantime, Shai, do you also want to, give a few top level pointers on just how people can get started if they're not already doing it? 2-3 things that they should start immediately.
Yeah, sure. So first, find an event you can go to. Get your pitch ready, your storyline ready. Find out who's going to be there and prepare 2 or 3 questions that you can ask the person you want to speak to. Not how they can help you, but just who they are and why they're there, and other similar questions which you can use as an icebreaker. So get your icebreaker ready. Have your pitch about what it is you're doing ready. And I would suggest it's a 3-part. Here's a problem, here's my solution, and this is what I'm looking for. That's basically 3 sentences. And engage in the conversation, make eye contact, keep your body language confident and self-assured, and just start doing it. There's nothing like just doing it. You won't learn from more lectures from me. You will learn only by doing it.
Sure, I think that's very true, and I think all 3 points are worth taking up immediately for our cohort. So I think we don't seem to have any more questions right now, Shai. You had a slide on social media, so I just wanted to give a couple of points there. Maybe you can please comment on it as well.
Sure.
So of course, in today's day and age, the visibility on social media has become quite important for many of our startups, especially for certain audiences. So one can't hesitate being on it. In India, for example, if you are receiving funding or any investment from certain pockets, they would want to make it quite visible. So you being visible is quite important as well, besides the so that the organization that's funding you can also use that visibility. and in certain circles, it's quite important to be visible. So I think that has made it quite important. It's unfortunate, but sometimes talking more is seen as doing more. But I think that said, even appearing to be doing more is important, I think. And also the fact that you give I mean, there's an impression of contemporariness or being up to date and staying willingness to sort of participate in external networks and keep them updated also sort of seems to matter. So I would encourage everybody to sort of look at a few networks and be on it. In India right now, Twitter is quite important, and many of you might need to be on it as well. Of course, there are others as well. So I don't know how it is perceived in Europe and other places, Shai, but in India right now, I think it's quite important to be on some of these platforms.
It's absolutely essential to be on the platforms, and as you said, to be visible. I'm also looking at the number of participants on this session, and I see something like 30, 32, 33 people on it. Had this session been about raising money, I imagine there will be all 60, 70 people on it, right? Because it's a topic of interest to everyone. But networking is not seen as important enough, and I'm really very pleased that there appear to be 30 people on the end of the session. No cameras are on, so we don't know whether they're quietly on Facebook or some other thing. But I have to tell you that if you don't have a network and you don't have access to a network and not part of a network and engage deeply in that, it is unlikely you will raise money. Actually, nobody just throws money at unknown people, right? That's called gambling. And that's a whole different game. If you're looking for investors, the so-called smart investors, smart money, they need to know you. They won't know you if you're not visible to them and or if they don't understand who you are. So as I said in one of my sound bites earlier, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So I'd like to end on that particular point, Premnath. I think hopefully it will be relevant, but being part of a network, not just going to networking events and asking for things, really, really important. Okay, there's a couple of other questions. Maybe whoever asked that question, Sandeep, maybe you can message me directly. I've given my email address. It's available. I'm more than happy to answer any further questions. Anybody there?
Yeah, sorry. I was speaking while keeping it on mute. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Well, thank you so much, Shai. I think this was wonderful. I've always, valued the sessions you used to run at Cambridge. In fact, for me, it was an eye-opener. I've learned quite a lot about networking from the Enterprise Tuesday sessions and some of the other events that were running around that time in Cambridge. And we have learned a lot from that and used it as well in Venture Center. Some of our events are on similar lines as well. In fact, many of our colleagues some of them who are Chevening fellows, I've always alerted them to, before they left for the Chevening fellowships, to especially watch the Cambridge or the Oxford dinners carefully and see what wonderful networking events they are actually, right? And learn from those as well. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. So I'll leave it to Mugdha now to close the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you, Mugdha.
Thank you so much, Shai. So over to some administrative announcements as always. We have already announced this launch event, which is going to take place on 20th of September. So I hope you have blocked your calendars for this. Details will reach you soon. Tomorrow we are having this panel discussion where we'll be having Ramji and my colleague Shalini joining us, where Dr. Premnath will be quizzing them with their inputs on how to build successful VIG applications. And he will also add his own pointers to it. So please feel free to attend this session at 3:30 tomorrow at 9 o'clock. The login links have already been shared with you. Feedback link is in the chat box. So please give your feedback. So meet you tomorrow at 3:30. That is all for today. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Shai.